the headline is huge.
Actor and comedian Bill Cosby will stand trial for sexual assault against former Temple University basketball coach Andrea Constand. Constand was the first woman to publicly accuse Cosby of assault.
In the closing argument, the defense actually started screaming at the top of their lungs in the courtroom, and I have a quote here. They said, "No one should be brought to an American courtroom to undergo this," screaming at the judge.
The fact that he is going to stand trial for Andrea and that case, it doesn't mean we're not going to hear about all the others as well.
78-year-old Bill Cosby ordered to stand trial in a criminal courtroom for the alleged sexual assault of Andrea Constand. Andrea, an employee at Cosby's alma mater, Temple University, was the first of more than 50 women who have come forward with similar accusations. Joining me, Mark Eiglarz, criminal defense attorney at SpeakToMark.com, Sarah Azari, criminal defense attorney, John Lieberman, investigative correspondent, and CNN correspondent Gene Caceres, who was in the courtroom for today's preliminary hearing. Gene, I understand Andrea Constand was not present, but what specifically does she accuse Cosby of having done?
Well, it all involves one night, and it's January or February 2004. Cosby was her mentor. She was torn because she was going to change careers. He said, "Come on over to the house." So she went over to his home. She walked inside. He had told her to wear very comfortable clothes. She got there. She told him that she couldn't sleep, that this all was weighing on her mind. He said, "Look, I can help." Went upstairs, according to her statement, came back down with blue pills. He told her to take them. It would make her relax, get the edge off. She said, "What are they?" He said, "They're herbal." And he also had poured some wine. So according to her statement, she took the pills, she drank some wine. About 20 minutes later, everything changed, became wobbly, blurred vision, couldn't stand up, slurred speech. He helped her to the sofa, and then she remembers him coming behind her, beginning to undress her, and she says he then sexually assaulted her.
Gene, what about this defense attorney screaming that you reported on in our opening piece? What was that all about? That sounds bizarre.
It was amazing. Absolutely amazing. He not only said what you already said about that someone shouldn't be in an American courtroom for this, but at the end in his closing arguments, he was looking straight at the judge. He said, "You can't check your common sense at the door. Stop this. Stop this. Stop this now." I mean, it was loud. It was booming. And it was, one could say, possibly very intimidating.
And there were inconsistencies, allegedly, according to the defense. What are these inconsistencies they're talking about?
The defense brought out a lot of things about Andrea Constand, because remember, this is the first time that we've seen her statement. We've heard Bill Cosby's statement now that was given in 2005. In her original statement, she had crossed out many things. Let me give you an example. She had gone to Foxwoods Casino because Bill Cosby was performing there, and after the concert, he invited her to his room where he was packing. She went to his room. She originally wrote, "We both laid down on the bed and our legs were touching." She crossed that out and then put, "We were close." And so there were things like that she crossed out. She originally said she drank cognac that night and crossed that out, saying, no, it wasn't cognac, it was wine. And so the defense really used this to attack her credibility. The problem is you're not looking at credibility in a preliminary hearing, but I think this judge, which was sort of a quiet magistrate judge, she allowed it all in.
John Lieberman, Camille Cosby was deposed in February. This was all unsealed just a few days ago. This is a case where several accusers are suing Cosby for having called them liars. How did her deposition factor into today's hearing?
Well, that's a good question, Drew. I mean, her deposition, not much of substance came out, but it's interesting because in many ways, Mr. Cosby brought it upon himself that his wife actually had to even be deposed and that this judge even unsealed the deposition and made it public. And I'll tell you this, Drew, over the past several days, I've talked to two of Mr. Cosby's alleged victims, and each of them said the same thing. And they said that this case that we're talking about tonight is their only hope for justice, for any semblance of justice, even in what happened to them, because this is the best shot, they believe, at an accuser coming face to face with Mr. Cosby, in a court of law because obviously of his failing health, obviously the other 50-plus alleged victims, a lot of the statute of limitations has run out. So they are really pegging their hopes for any semblance of justice on this case that we're talking about tonight.
And John, when you say that he brought it on himself, the Camille's deposition having been unsealed, this is because he sued them for defamation, right? That's what allowed this to be that's what required this deposition.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, by his legal team coming out and essentially saying that all of these women were lying, or most of them were lying, that's what I mean when brought it upon himself, because some of the questioning, most of the questioning, frankly, to Camille Cosby was centered around the Quaaludes and many of the allegations that these women have made that Mr. Cosby's legal team have said simply are not true.
Mark, you want to ring in? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm concerned it's something that John just said, and I feel for these victims because I call them victims. I don't think that they're all making this up. So what John reported was their hopes for justice hinges upon this case. Let's break that down for a second. What they're saying is they want Cosby convicted. They want to see him go to prison because he tortured these women. What he did was reprehensible. Here's the problem. Today was just a probable cause hearing. She wasn't even in the courtroom. This was going to be rubber stamped and moved along with no problem. What the attorney did in court was grandstanding. That was for the court of public opinion. That attorney knew, like I know when I'm arguing in front of a judge, this is going to get passed along for trial. The problem is that trial is different. The burden of proof is beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt. And in my next soundbite, I will tell you how they have numerous problems proving this case beyond a reasonable doubt in spite of his obvious guilt.
Hang on, I'm going to give that to Sarah.
Mark is
wait. Hang on. Here, let Sarah give us that.
I agree with Mark.
Sarah will take it. She's got it. Yeah.
I agree with Mark, and that there might be 50-plus women making these allegations, and that this is their day for justice. But this case has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. This particular case about Andrea Constant, the issue that I have about this preliminary hearing that occurred today is that although it's not unusual for the victim to not be there to testify, and that an officer can testify as to what statements she made about the incident. The problem I have with today was that the officer that testified was not the officer that Andrea Constant had spoken to. So this is double hearsay. This is, Drew telling Mark, Mark telling me, and then I going to court and testify. So that's the problem. And I think if I was that defense attorney, I would probably be kicking and screaming, although maybe not to that extent.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, but nobody's saying this is a slam dunk case, and that's not what these women were saying either. What they were saying was they are glad that this is finally going to be heard in open court. Obviously, there are holes. Obviously, there's not a lot of physical evidence. Obviously, there are conflicting statements. But to them, this is step one of what they have been hoping for the better part of a decade.
And absolutely the conflicting statements goes to the jury. That's a question of fact. Who's the jury going to believe ultimately in this case? But my problem is with the judge today who allowed an officer to testify to what another officer said.
We're getting the weeds a little bit about this, and after you said it is just a hearing at this point. I want to go at something of substance here that I pulled out of a previous suit by Andrea Constant in 2005. This was settled in 2006. This is a deposition in which Bill Cosby was describing what it was about sexual intercourse that, what did he think happened to the women when he was having sex with them? And he said, quote, is something that I feel the woman will succumb to more of a romance and more of a feeling. Not love, but it's deeper than a playful situation. What he was saying was that he was disturbed by the fact, or at least he was worried, that if he had sex with a woman, these brittle, fair sex would have these feelings of love, and that was disturbing to him. So he had to kind of knock them out to make sure they didn't have that feeling. Sarah, you get this logic? It really is very disturbing when you see that deposition. I saw that quote and I was like, oh my God, that's why he thought he was doing this. He thought in some weird way he was preventing them from having feelings from the sexual encounter, so he was saving them from some discomfort.
Right. No, I think it is disturbing, and my problem with that deposition is the fact that it's now going to be admissible evidence. And had he known that this would happen, because the DA back in the day said we're done, we're not going to file charges against you, you're good to go. So his attorney advised him not to invoke his Fifth Amendment and actually, Fifth Amendment right, and actually be deposed and make statements at that deposition under oath. So that's the problem with that deposition, is that he acted in reliance on the DA's office.
Mark, real quick, I got to go, but quickly.
And let me just say this, for those rolling their eyes at what Sarah just said, well, who cares? It'll help convict Cosby. Those same rules apply to you. So when a prosecutor tells you or your family members that we're not going to prosecute you, go ahead and speak, and then turns around and uses those statements against you, that's not fair. That shouldn't happen.
Next up, I have one of Cosby's many accusers here. She believes she may have been his first victim. And still to come, a girl who says she was chained in a basement for more than a year escapes. You'll hear from the man accused of kidnapping her own stepfather. Back after this.
And when you're stuffing drugs or alcohol into a woman and then calling it sex, it's diabolical, it's disgusting, it's unacceptable, and it's rape. Consent is not the absence of a no. And when you're stuffing drugs or alcohol into a woman and then calling it sex, it's diabolical, it's disgusting, it's unacceptable, and it's rape.
Will Bill Cosby face jail time for sexual assault? The first of more than 50 accusers will have her day in criminal court. Cosby ordered today to stand trial in a Pennsylvania case. I'm back with Mark, Sarah, John, and Jean. And Jean, you wanted to clarify something. Go ahead.
Well, back in 2005, Andrea Constand did fly here to the Philadelphia area, Montgomery County, to give that formal statement. And that's what was read in court today. It was given to two detectives. They were both in the room. And Catherine Hart, one of those two detectives, was the one on the stand today that read her statement. Now, the defense brought out there was a blizzard coming. Her lieutenant said she could leave early. So before it was finished, she did leave. The other detective was there. The defense put them on the stand. He is the one that witnessed Andrea Constand crossing out certain things and writing other things in their place at the bottom of that statement.
So, Sarah, it was the actual officer or the detective who heard her testimony. Got it?
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
All right. Joining me by phone, I've got Christina Rulli, one of Cosby's many accusers. She thinks she may have been the first he allegedly assaulted. Thank you so much, Christina, for joining us. What was it you experienced?
Well, I was very fortunate. I went to a party at his house, or so I thought. There was one other woman there. He offered me a drink. I remember thinking as I sipped the drink that there was some strange taste to it, like, wow, this is really strong. There was a certain kind of burny taste to it. And I blacked out. Like many others who've talked, I awakened naked in bed with him, and I was very fortunate. I was so sickened by the drug that I ran into the bathroom and threw up violently. When I came out, because it was now early, light was starting to come up, I ran back out, and he was gone.
Christina,
and so I left and went home, and I had to go to work that day.
Christina, were you? I think I heard you tell your story once, and were you the one that was told by your boss to sort of shut up when you brought it up?
I never brought it up with my boss. No, that was someone else. I was afraid to tell anyone because he was a client of my company, or so I believed at the time. He was often around the office of the talent agency where I worked.
I see. And you testified in the civil case against Mr. Cosby. Do you expect to be called as a witness in the criminal case?
No, I was a Jane Doe in the criminal case 10 years ago. We never testified. We were given affidavits to sign as to what had happened. I volunteered to come forward anonymously and, not as a plaintiff, but I never knew there were any others.
Do you have concerns about the accusations of some of the women? Do they all seem the veracity?
No,
you don't
not
have
at
any
all.
concerns.
In fact, the more I hear, the more a similarity. For instance, this was 1965, and the next three women after me that he assaulted were all had something put in their drink. Then, in the late 60s, you start hearing about women taking Quaaludes, or he gave them a pill, etc. So I think he changed his routine, but nonetheless, we all woke up from being completely out. And the more that I've met, there's so many similarities between the bathrobe, the fascination with hair, very similar things. You could literally make a chart of them.
Christina, thank you so much for sharing this with us. John, you've now spoken, you said, to two other women that have been through this experience. Same stories?
They generally tell the exact same story, and that's what is, look, it's all circumstantial without physical evidence, but that's what is, in some ways, it ties everything together. They all tell nearly the identical story.
And I want to be clear that we at HLN CNN cannot independently corroborate what is being reported here right now, but we will keep an eye on this story for sure. Next up, a father and son are accused of kidnapping a girl and chaining her in their basement. No strangers to her. The alleged victim is that man's stepdaughter. And still to come, was a student bullied to death? Her parents say the school ignored pleas to end her torment. Back after this.
Your 13-year-old daughter
Yes.
claims she was held captive in your basement there on Noble Street, shackled to a beam.
So captive would you're okay? I actually right at this point I'm not going to answer that. Timothy Saboro and his son Eston were arraigned this morning. The 13-year-old escaped last night, which led to the men's arrest.
You could tell she hadn't had a bath in a while.
She said she was fed food scraps and forced to use a bucket as a toilet, shackled to a support beam for over a year.
She told the women she had been held captive inside this house.
Her little skirt was all torn and wrinkled. She had no shoes on.
Was she well taken care of?
Yes, well taken care of. She knows I love her.
A 13-year-old girl escapes from a house of horrors where she says she was chained in the basement for over a year. Tonight, her stepfather and stepbrother are under arrest and in jail. And in a bizarre twist, the stepfather is talking to anyone who's going to listen. This is now in multiple jailhouse interviews. He has become suddenly loquacious. Back with Mark, Sarah, and John. John, you have more details.
Yeah, you know, Drew, I was a national correspondent at America's Most Wanted for years, and I've read thousands of police reports, but this one is one of the most just ugly and shocking. It gives you chills. Let me just read this to you, Drew, right from the police report. The victim stated that the defendant kept her shackled to a support beam in the basement of her house by her ankle, and she was fed spoiled and old scraps of food, forced to defecate and void in a bucket containing ammonia, and she was kept like this for over a year. What's also shocking, Drew, is that they executed a search warrant on this house, and they found physical evidence, handcuffs and the like, according to police, that corroborate this teenage girl's story, that she was indeed held virtually like a wild animal for a period of months, captive in the basement of her stepfather's home.
Let me show you her stepfather in a jailhouse interview. He is asked why his stepfather would make allegations such as this. Take a look.
Why would she say this then?
Because she wanted to be away from the house, and she wanted to be with people that I knew wasn't good for her, her well-being.
Like boys?
No, much worse than that. I have so much to tell you that it's amazing. I mean,
did you ever lock her up?
I would not ever. Did I ever lock her up? No, I'm not going to answer that either. I don't want to, not right now.
Joining me, Casey Jordan, criminologist, host of Wives with Knives on Investigation Discovery. Casey, here's the deal. Is this guy delusional, distorted, disorganized, doesn't, sort of magically doesn't remember important things? Or is he just a horrible parent that has, seems to be unable to manage a child's behavior, so he locks her in a room?
I think it's all of the above. But right now, this evasive way he's dealing with the questions and the fact that he is blaming her, hinting at the fact that she was incorrigible. He had to chain her up because she was going to go running around with something so much worse than boys. He's making her to sound, at 13 years old, like she is completely beyond control. And yet, when she finally gets out of the house, she's just found wandering around the Port Authority trying to reach some relatives. And where is he? He's in a van with his other kids and his pets and a gun and a map to another city trying to flee. So I think his actions before this interview speak really of his guilt.
What do we think this is? Is he delusional? I mean, there's a premeditated quality to what he's doing, and that he, as you said, he's got a gun and animals and a map to get out of there. But on the other hand, he seems like disorganized. Is there something going on here?
Yeah, I'm not sure I would call it quite delusional, but in his mind, he probably believed he was disciplining her. And this is how he assuaged his guilt for what is essentially, at the very least, psychological and emotional abuse. I would not be at all surprised if there's evidence later of physical and sexual abuse. He keeps her locked up there, and now that the jig is up and he realized society does not approve of putting your stepdaughter in handcuffs in the basement for a year, he's trying to backpedal and make it look like it was for her own protection. But during that time, I know she hasn't seen her mother for at least a year. He, in his mind, kept thinking he has separated her out of society for her own good. But I'm sure that she was the victim of terrible abuse in the past year.
Speaking of that, of her well-being, Child Protective Services actually conducted a welfare check back in 2014, but they didn't detect any of this Sarah, system failure or just
No. Well,
yes. I mean, at minimum, a system
Dr.
failure.
Drew, the reason DCFS got involved in 2014 was because they had seen one of the kids, I believe this girl maybe, or one of the step siblings, eating out of the trash can. So the concern was these kids are neglected, they're abused, they're not being fed, and DCFS got involved to investigate further. And they saw that no, these kids are well fed, they're not malnourished, and they closed the case. I mean, you can't put everything on DCFS. DCFS is not the police. If there's a report, if there's evidence, they will investigate. And if they need to take action to remove those kids, they will. But here, that wasn't the case.
Here's another interview. The reporter questions this man, the stepfather, about alleged abuse. Take a look.
She also says that she was made to eat spoiled food, scraps of food.
I'm not going to answer that right now either.
Was she well taken care of?
Yes, well taken care of. She knows I love her.
This girl told police she hadn't been in school since the first grade. Mark, kids are allowed to, you guys telling me it's not a system failure? Kids are just allowed to drop off the grid? First graders?
Oh, my goodness.
What? Oh, my goodness, what,
Listen,
Mark? Oh, my goodness, what? I'm asking.
Oh, my goodness. You're dealing with this stuff every day. I come on your show maybe once a week, and I can barely get through it. That's what, oh, my God, is. I have almost a 13-year-old daughter, so I'm thinking of what this girl went through. Yeah. I'm having a tough time with it.
Yeah.
However, I will stay calm for a moment and say that I wouldn't necessarily immediately conclude that DCF failed if they came and they saw that she wasn't malnourished.
Mark, I want to interrupt you. I'm not saying, I understand that. I'm not saying necessarily DCFS, but I'm saying a first grader disappears and mom flees. I'm going to tell you about her in a few minutes. But mom takes off and everyone just goes, oh, well, anyway, another one we lost. I mean, nobody.
But doesn't it
I am not suggesting that there shouldn't be someone held responsible if they drop the ball. This is so disgusting. Someone needs to go through it step by step and see what can be done differently.
Sarah, what do you want to say there?
But what can be done differently, Mark? Because what's DCF going to do? Put surveillance cameras inside the homes to see if parents are treating their children right?
Hold on, Sarah. Hold on. Got you two. Wait a minute. Casey.
Makes a good point about school.
Yeah, school.
Why wasn't she in school?
And
That's
by the way,
question.
take Casey. You come in. You're doing an evaluation. You come in and get a look at that dad. Aren't your spidey senses already up? Casey, it's for you.
Sorry, I just lost audio. What was your question?
I was saying that you walk into that house, do an evaluation, and you see that dad. Aren't your spidey senses more than tingling? They're vibrating?
Yeah. Because he really is dripping with manipulation. He's engaged in some kind of denial and self-brainwashing. I mean, he had nailed planks over the basement windows. I'm not saying DCF is at fault here. The girl knew to say when she was questioned, I've supposedly homeschooled, but she's never been homeschooled. She just knows the right answers to say. But really the question is, where is this girl's mother?
She was trained to say that.
Where is...
Oh, I'll tell you where the mother is. I'm going to tell you guys. I got to take a break, but I'm going to tell you where the mother is. The mother fled. Wait, Mark. The mother is a fugitive in Las Vegas. And still to come, I have a teenager. Hold on. You can tell me what you wanted to after the break. A teenager commits suicide after she was allegedly tormented by classmates. Her grieving parents say it did not have to happen. Back up to this.
And I seen a young girl that is 13 years old, and she having problems at home, and she had a lot of bags, and she had ran away. She said that she had been peeing in the bed, and her dad had chained her down in the basement with cuffs on her ankles.
She was on a program they gave her, it was like 50 points, and if she would wet the bed, she'd get handcuffed, put down in the basement with no food.
13-year-old girl shackled in the basement, fed spoiled food, and she finally managed to escape. Her stepfather and stepbrother have been charged with kidnapping. Back with Mark, Sarah, John, and Casey. John, how in fact did she escape?
Well, I'll tell you, this little girl could have saved, or this teen rather, could have saved her own life. She was so courageous, and she planned to break out of there. Her plan, she told police, was to go and find her biological mother, who she believed probably left around 2012. What she did was she smuggled an extra key to her handcuffs down into the basement. She knew when her stepfather and her stepbrother were at work, and that's when she unlocked herself, grabbed some food, took a change of clothes, and left. And that's when this neighbor saw her wandering on the streets and called 911, as you just heard.
And apparently the mother is a wanted fugitive living in Las Vegas since 2012, as you said. Casey, and this girl was not biologically related to the perpetrator here. And let's sort of shine a light on the person that is most likely to be the greatest risk to a child. It's a male in the home who is not genetically related. Would that be accurate?
Yes, it is. And you are most in danger of the person who is sitting at your dining room table or sitting on the sofa next to you watching television. And do not discount the importance of this case, the tragedy of this case, just because it's allegedly family who is accused. This reminds me so much of the Cleveland Captors case. It has a lot of similarities. Even that home looks the same.
Yes, I agree.
And just because this man knew her since she was a young child, in my mind, that even makes it worse because he used her trust. He didn't abduct her off the street. He didn't have to. He used the situation of her mother being on the run, the fact that she was in the home, the convenience of just letting her disappear. Neighbors just quit seeing her a year ago, but they didn't know where she went. And he used the cover of him being the stepfather to exploit and abuse this child. So I have no pity for him, and I think the fact that he's family makes it worse.
Now, Mark, before the break, you wanted to ring it with something. What was that?
Well, I got to tease you. We've been friends for a while, and you brought up something in the last segment. So now I'm thinking that there's a police department of Drew Pinsky's, and the arrest report would read something like this. The defendant was stripped of his liberty, and the children were taken away because officers spoke with the defendant, and their spider senses were tingling.
Spidey.
Really? Is that all it takes?
Get it right.
Spidey,
Get it right.
Whatever.
Get it right.
Okay.
Listen,
Well, now we've corrected the report.
I'm talking
now it makes sense.
I'm talking to a mental health professional who's using her instincts just by looking at the perpetrator. Come on, Casey, help me out here. Yeah, let's gang up on Mark a little bit.
Okay, well, I mean, first of all,
Sarah's got my back.
So don't forget, this stepfather is a former firefighter who's been fired twice, and that's a really hard thing to do. You have to really screw up to get fired from a city job. And he was not following the rules. He was chronically late.
Wait, Sarah, time out. No, wait. What Casey is saying is that when we're doing a mental health assessment, we start adding up a score, how they make us feel, what their history is, what their employment record is.
Okay, maybe
and Mark, it's maybe not be police work, but it's clinical work, and that's all we're talking about here.
And I respect clinical work, but if you're trying to say that that's somehow evidence that he's an abusive father, I don't think that
no,
the fact that he's
evidence.
not a model.
It's evidence of character. He doesn't follow the rules. That was the number one reason he was fired.
No, we're talking about different characters at issue. The character at issue here is whether he abused his child or not, whether he's abusive, neglectful, etc.
Right.
The character you're talking about is, his honesty with his boss at work.
No, Sarah. No, we're talking about building a case for difficulty functioning and what those difficulties were that lead us to conclude certain things about characterological construct, not character. Is this an upstanding person or not? Let me go to the phone here. I've got Karen Laudermill. She's the lady that called 911 after the 13-year-old had explained her ordeal to her. Karen, tell us what happened when you saw this 13-year-old girl.
Well, it was just another day at work, and I was coming down to take my trash out. And I was on my way to the dumpster, but I looked out the window, and I seen a young black female walking, but she was very frail, and she had a lot of bags.
And what did she tell you? How did she look?
She looked bad. She didn't tell me anything because I hadn't left the building to go and approach her. I seen her, and it was just God. It was God. I'll tell you the reason why, because when I looked at her, I started running to the side door, through our building to the side door to cut her off. I cut her off by the dumpsters that's in the back because she had walked on down the sidewalk. And I stopped because I didn't really want to scare her, but I stopped and I said, come here, like that. And she looked at me. I said, you done ran away from home. And she said, no. So I started to approach her. And I said, yes, you done ran away from home. I said, whatever's going on at home, you can tell me. She said, my dad said you don't talk to strangers because if you talk to strangers, you'll get in trouble and you'll make a lot of trouble.
Which is sort of a classic way that these perpetrators, Casey, can sort of split their victims off from the world so they can do their thing. Thank you, Karen. I've got to take a break. Next, what drove a beautiful young middle school student to commit suicide? Her former principal may have an answer. Back after this.
What's the address of the emergency? 911, what's the address of the emergency?
I need an ambulance, please.
December 11th, Emily Olson came home from school, pulled out her dad's gun, and pointed it at her head.
My daughter shot herself.
What would drive a 13-year-old to suicide? Bullying took a toll on Emily. Emily's student file contains details of a fight in October, less than 2 months before her suicide. Last year in 6th grade, this girl was getting bullied like bad. It was awful last year, and people are still doing it this year. Emily's father, Mark, tried to warn the school. In a January 2014 email, he wrote, "Emily has become the target of bullying by a few girls. I have a bad feeling that if nothing is done, then this has the possibility to escalate into something worse."
13-year-old girl kills herself with her father's gun. Her parents say the middle school could have prevented it. Emily Olson's parents are suing the school district, her school administrators, and the students they claim tormented their daughter relentlessly. Back with Mark, Sarah, John, and Casey. John, what do we believe this girl was going through every day at school?
Well, I mean, look, in many ways, Drew, Emily was bullied to death. She was physically bullied. She was bullied on social media. She was bullied psychologically. I'll give you a couple examples. An Instagram account was set up, and on the Instagram account, it posted, "Emily Olson is gay. I'm Emily. I'm gay, and I love to." Random people in the woods. Then this escalated into physical altercations where she would be called names in school, confronted in the bathroom, and allegedly hit and beaten and shoved, and it goes on and on, tripped, and her belongings would be broken, her lunch would be stolen, expletives would be yelled at her, and it continued, as I said, on social media and in the classroom and in the hallways, and she simply, at the end of the day, it appears, couldn't escape it.
Now, the school superintendent responded when the word got out that bullying may have led to Emily's suicide. Here's how he responded.
8 days after her death, Superintendent Paul Otten issued a statement to parents. The Fairfield Township Police Department conducted a thorough investigation and did not find any credible evidence that bullying was a factor in this tragedy. It seems there is an unjustified need to place blame for this horrendous event.
Mark, just based on our superficial brush with this case, I mean, they didn't look at her file. They apparently didn't even look at the student file. We saw it. The media asked for it, and that's why we got to see the bullying. The police didn't look for that? What's that about?
That statement is insulting. If there's ever a case where there's evidence of bullying, it's here. What's a father to do? You can't physically walk onto a school campus and try to prevent your daughter from continued torture by other students. So he writes a letter saying, something's going to happen. Please do something. And they didn't do anything.
Sarah?
I like this lawsuit. I think they should hit and make sure they get paid.
Sarah?
Mark, what is a father to do? The father has a gun laying around in his house where he knows that
Sarah,
his daughter.
Sarah,
no, I'm
you
sorry.
can't blame the father for his
girl. Wait,
Oh, come on.
Sarah, this girl. Wait, listen. This girl had a history of self-mutilation. She had a history of depression before she even went to the school. So first of all, as much as I would love to love this lawsuit too, like you, Mark, was any of this related to the bullying? And why did the parents not move her to another school?
All right, Casey, let me ask Casey, what should have been done? What should have been done?
Oh, my God, that's like asking why a battered woman doesn't leave.
Right.
I mean, they did every single thing to use the system as it was set up. It was without affect. I mean, it was useless. They used due process. They sent emails. They talked to the principal. I mean, I love that scene from the old movie, Hand That Rocks the Cradle, where the nanny goes onto the school playground and addresses the bully and shakes him a little, and then he leaves the little girl alone. You can't do that these days. Parents who get on the school bus and address their child's attacker get arrested. So they followed the rules and they used due process, and nothing was done. The school district not only didn't prevent it, when it was brought to their attention, they didn't address it. And I hate nuisance suits as an attorney, but I'm telling you, I hope the parents prevail in this one.
John,
and if nothing else, it will raise consciousness about the problem.
Got to go to break. John, to you after this break. We'll continue this conversation. We're discussing a 13-year-old girl who committed suicide after having been tormented at school. Parents are suing, claiming the school ignored warning signs that could have prevented the suicide. We should note that the school superintendent took a job at another school district. The principal has resigned, citing, quote, personal reasons. I'm back with Mark, Sarah, John, and Casey. And John, you wanted to say something as we were going out in the last break.
Well, Drew, yeah, this wasn't just a father begging for somebody to listen to him. Obviously, this has to be proven, but in the lawsuit itself, it spells out a number of different instances where teachers or administrators saw with their own eyes the physical altercations that were happening and saw with their own eyes things that were scribbled on the bathroom wall, like Emily is a hoe, go die, Emily, go kill yourself, Emily. So if that is proven to be true, that is some pretty strong and damning evidence that those at the school knew exactly what was going on.
Go ahead, Mark.
I can't let Sarah go without somehow giving her some pushback with her statements. Here, the school ignored so many signs of bullying, and she immediately blames the victim's father. He should eliminate all knives, guns, pills, high areas that she can jump from. You don't think the school has any responsibility,
Take away her
Sarah?
shoelaces and her belt. What are you going to do, Sarah?
No. Listen, if the school, in fact, had notice, if that is proven to be true, yes, I do believe the school has liability. But that still does not make it okay for a gun to be in a home with a young girl who has a history of self-mutilation and depression. That is not okay.
Let me show you a post Emily put on Facebook in a conversation with a friend. It reads, "My New Year's resolution is to die, to have my perfect suicide go as planned. I have the perfect plan, but why does suicide seem like the only way out? I never wanted to die in my life, and now I do. I hate what I have become." 10 days later, she's dead. Now, I'm hoping, Casey, that she must have been in some sort of treatment. So there may be clinicians that are going to get looked at, scrutinized here as well, I suspect.
Yes, but at the same time, everything in that message just screams of the pain that she was in. And sometimes no amount of medication or treatment can really address that if the causal factors are ongoing. So you can medicate somebody, you can counsel them, but if she's still being bullied every single day and no one is doing anything about it, and she's powerless as a 13-year-old to solve it herself, it's not surprising. I mean, a 13-year-old committing suicide is relatively rare.
Yeah.
But suicide among 10 to 14-year-olds has gone up 50% in the last 2 decades, and about 71% of those are directly linked to bullying. So this is a huge problem.
It's a huge
and other
deal.
parents
Yeah.
have come forward to say that their kids were bullied and nothing was done either. So it was a systemic problem.
Mark, your kids just moved through their middle school years, didn't they? And you've seen what kids do. It's pretty egregious.
I've got 2 still in middle school, and it is. And let me tell you something. The minute they get one notice of bullying, forget about numerous, like in this case, you stop, you make it a priority, you think maybe someone might die, work backwards and say, what would I do differently? That's what every principal should be doing as a result of this case. Enough already.
All right, guys. John, I was reflecting as we went through the stories today that I've seen you go through some horrible stories, having been embedded with the whack pack. But in spite of that, tonight got your spidey senses a-tingling.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, between the whack pack and all my time in America's Most Wanted and then these stories tonight, Drew, I don't know when I can come back, my friend.
I hope you will come back soon. Thank you, panel. DVR us, then you can watch this show anytime. We do appreciate you watching. I appreciate my panelists as well. We'll see you next time. Nancy Grace is up next.